morning all, and welcome to the first of Wines of Germany's Big G trade sessions, this year taking a virtual format for obvious reasons, and in partnership with Harpers Wine and Spirit. I'm Andrew Catchpole, editor of Harpers, and today I'm joined by Germany expert David Motion of the Winery, along with a great selection of wines for this new wave tasting. We also have Caroline Tanner and Brianne Rosser of Wines from Germany ready in the background if we need an assist in any way. Right, then this session kicks off a two-day celebration of Germany's wines with tasting masterclasses, in my vineyard winemaker virtual tours, and a closing debate, a wine for all reasons, all part of the mix. Before I hand over to David and we dive into the tasting important part, which we'll do very soon, I think it's worth considering Wines of Germany's marketing straplines for 2021 and 2022, as they say a lot about the modern image this country's producers are keen to portray. 2021's, as some of you will, I'm sure, be aware, is Coolest Wines on Earth, while 22 will be a wine for all reasons, hence the title of our closing debate at 3 p.m. tomorrow. I'd venture to say that for many consumers, Germany is a relatively blank slate when it comes to wines, with few preconceptions and thus everything to discover and playful. Those straplines are modern, fresh statements rooted in simple messages of diversity, of premium wines that still offer great value, an important point, and of accessibility with clear front runners when it comes to varieties and styles. And we're going to be looking in just a moment at the two flagships, I think inarguably, Riesling and Spätburgunder for our tasting today. Now, a big part of Wines of Germany's thrust is to appeal to younger drinkers too. And as all pointers show, these wine drinkers generally are trading up. They're looking for cooler climate, they're looking for quality, they're looking for individuality, they're looking for new styles to them, all of which Germany has in spades. There's a real sense of discovery, I think, for a lot of wine drinkers when they come to Germany, which I know we know so well in the trade. But cool. Okay, I said we taste soon, so just a couple of quick housekeeping points from me. We'd very much like this to be an interactive session, so please do fire off questions. Q&A function best, so I can keep my eye on it. If you ask a question at any time, we'll answer as many as we can, and we'll endeavour to do so as we go along to keep it fresh and interactive. And then on a slightly more somber note, with one of our wines being from the R region, whereas I'm sure you'll all be aware that terrible recent flooding has impacted so many. David's also going to touch on that and let you know where you can donate if you wish to help out disaster hit producers there. So enough from me, let's get tasting. And David, before you introduce your first wine, I thought a little bit of a rewind.
Yeah.
And could you tell us just how someone with a really successful music biz career got hooked into Germany and its wines?
My career in whatever area it is has always had certain amount of ups and downs, and so I was a record producer in the 80s. Got into wine around that time. Particularly Burgundy was my way in, and I had a nice dalliance with California for a while. Germany was always around because I'd visit Germany fairly frequently. So that was inevitably part of my love of it. Anyway, I had various ups and downs in music. It was always those kind of like steep slope, being moderately successful and then a graceful decline over some time. And then I started writing music for commercials. And then that was quite successful. I did a movie called Orlando that did quite well as well. And then, so the next time I had accumulated some capital, not an enormous amount, but some, I thought I'd like to buy an income somehow. Didn't really kind of entirely work that way, but I bought the winery in 1996. So then what happened, I realized very, very quickly that it was going to work financially, or it wasn't that viable buying from agents and then selling them in my shop. And so then I realized that I had to put a bit more money in and then start importing, finding wines and importing. Now, so that happened fairly quickly, certainly within 2-3 years, which was basically Burgundy, Champagne, France generally, Italy, a bit of Spain, California. So traveled quite a lot, which I enjoyed. But always in the background, I knew that I had a love of German wine, Riesling in particular. And the prevailing wisdom at the time in the wine trade, and we're talking about the late 90s now, sort of mid to late 90s, was that German wines were impossible to sell. It was as simple as that. Beautiful wines, but they just sort of, there would be 3 or 4 bottles, you know, at the bottom and a bottom shelf gathering dust. So anyway, so it came to around 2000, and I thought, well, I want to drink German wine. So, and in fact, everybody that I worked with in the winery wanted to drink German wine. So it was inevitable that we would have to make the trip and go there. And the idea was that we'd go there with the van, buy a pallet of wine, and if nobody drank it, we would. That was the idea. So there was also a bit of a UK British wine trade wisdom at the time, was that dry wines were rubbish and the sweet wines were the proper wines, the ones with residual sugar. So the plan was we'd go to Germany, do a week or so there, find some wines, come back with maybe 25% dry, and use them as a stepping stone into proper German wines, the kind of sweeter residual sugar styles. So what happened was that the dry ones sold out immediately, or very quickly, let's put it like that, and the sweet ones stuck around. So the next time we went, we did it the other way around, 75% dry, 25% sweet, and then same thing happened, the dry sold out. And so, you know, after about a year and a half, we were then buying 95 to 99% dry wines. Just to wind back a little, the first week that we were out there, I went with a colleague. You know, we ended up tasted through the whole range. German producers were all producing dry wines at that time. And the first couple of nights in hotel restaurants or whatever, we'd end up drinking, you know, aged sweet Rieslings, nice old Spätlesers and the like. But then about kind of day 3, we started being drawn more towards the dry wines. And so that then became our you know, our active choice. So it was inevitable. I mean, I am a bit of a Riesling geek at this point and adore it. And so that's really how it came about. But yeah, I mean, now's probably a good moment, at least, just to sort of start tasting, you know, just open I'm sure you've got your wines ready in your glasses, whether or not you want me to talk about this now, or if there's something else you want me to talk about. But should we at least start with the first one?
Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Frank and which
exactly. So so just to rewind as well. So there's a map of German wine growing regions. They're all pretty far north in comparison with other areas. I mean, the R is far north, the Mosel is far north. It's all pretty marginal, really, in terms of climate. And, you know, even further north there's Arlonstraat and Saxon near Dresden. So we've picked out 4 dry Rieslings, each from a different region, and 2 Spätburgunders from the same region, you know, the R being a kind of a current topic. So this one is this is from Paul Fürst. Sorry, I should say Sebastian Fürst now. It's the son who's been making the wine for a while. Fürst is better known for Spätburgunder, legendary producer of Spätburgunder that ages beautifully. Might be a moment, you can see Franken on the map. It's there we go. The left-hand side, yeah, that's good. Franken on the map. The left-hand side is a kind of a V shape, or, you know, an upside down kind of 2 sides of a square, if you like, with Miltenberg at the bottom. So that's about 45 minutes drive east of Frankfurt Airport. The furthest area, well, let's say the bit around Volkach and Iphofen, takes about an hour and a half. So it is east. It's a bit of a drive, but it's not that far east. So where you see Miltenberg on the kind of the sort of bottom of what's effectively a triangle at that point, there's just around the corner, there's Burgstadt, and that's the home of the Fürst family. I think we can probably go to the next slide. There we go. So Burgstadt, the most famous vineyard there is the St. Grafenberg. And the Firsts have their winery. They're the only winery physically in the vineyard. It's not as imposing as it might seem, but it's a fantastic full south-facing vineyard on Buntsandstein, which is colourful sandstone. I think they call it ferrous rocky soil, so there is a definite red tinge to it. So there's some iron in it, which gives it a kind of a spicy content. They have vineyards. There's the winery itself, which they built. I want to say it was in 1979. I think that's when they built that winery. Paul Fürst was, with his wife Monica, were among the first to start making what were known in Germany as barrique style wines, which was a sort of it was a byword for a new style, a modern style of winemaking. Many other growers, many of the ones that we'll be moving on to after this, were all part of the same. We can call it a revolution, but Paul Fürst was one of the first. So, in addition to Spätburgunder, they also make some Silvaner, which is best known in the region, and also some Riesling. Now, the Riesling they make is from this vineyard, or most of it's from this vineyard. So this wine here, it's mineral, it's pure mineral, so pure mineral Riesling. It's a dry wine, and it's the first pass through the vines, through the vineyards, the first picking. It's their estate Riesling, so we can call that entry level. It's all about kind of, just sort of minerality. It's bright, it's fresh.
I just love the boldness of the sort of statement in the name, really, pure mineral. Just this is what we're about. We're not mucking about. We don't worry or care about any contentiousness over the use of the word minerality. We all understand what we're talking about, and this is exactly what this wine's about. Yeah, and it's rather wonderful.
Well, I mean, that's maybe a good moment to talk about Riesling generally. I mean, so for me, it's a thrilling grape. It has a kind of an energizing quality about it. It wakes me up. It's also incredibly transparent of its terroir, which is, I can't honestly say that I sense terroir in so many other grapes. I mean, this one, it's just like clear as day. There's the Riesling, and then there's a sense of the soil that it's grown on. So, I mean, that's also, as we kind of unfold over the next few minutes and few wines, I mean, that's something I'm sure we're going to keep coming back to. Particularly when we get to the Mosel, there are growers like Clemens Busch, who has 3 different types of slate there. So there's grey slate, there's red slate, and there's blue slate. And even they're all on the same vineyard, with pretty much the same exposition, they do taste decidedly different. So that I find fascinating. And I remember showing a friend who's, a music business, oddly enough, some Rieslings a while ago. And he said something that kind of stuck with me. And he said, they're like electricity. And I think that's probably quite a nice way of describing it. He then went on further to say it's a bit like putting a rectangular PP3 battery on your tongue. I'm not sure that that's necessarily quite so attractive, but it's just to kind of develop that further. But it's just so endlessly varied, which I adore. The winemaking styles, the regions they come from, and all the wines that we're tasting today are within a very narrow geographical range. Like you can get geeky on Burgundy about red Burgundies and this vineyard and that vineyard, that grower here, these rows there. It's the same with Riesling. That's what I find endlessly fascinating, in the age, the different vintages, even so-called bad vintages. I don't really hold with that. I think the best vintages, or the most interesting, are the ones that are less fashionable, 2010, 2014, 2008, that kind of thing. So not the ripe ones. That for me is cool climate Riesling, but that's what keeps me going with that.
I think it's just to jump in there, David, touched on before, diversity. Obviously, you've got the diversity of varieties in Germany. It's just that Riesling and perhaps more latterly Spätburgunder have risen, are very well known. But it's the diversity within, as you say, with Riesling playing to its terroir, which just ensures this amazing sort of cornucopia of differing styles. But often within that, framework that we all recognise. I mean, Vivian Franks, hi Vivian out there saying, delicious, fresh, Christmas, long, vibrant finish. Exactly. That is there with Riesling, with that. Nathan Hill as well. Hi Nathan, that says he loves first and the Iffelfen area, but also great love for the Würzburger Stein and Stettener Stein wines.
Lovely.
Wonderful Rieslings, and also mentions age work Silvaner, for example. So
here we go.
I mean, there's just much to go on.
And don't you love the box Beutel as well? I don't know if that's a thing with anybody, but I love those. That's a Silvaner that I'm looking forward to trying.
Absolutely love it. Sorry, quick point of housekeeping. A few people have asked about prices. I know that Wines Germany, Rianne is looking to pop those up. I'm hoping they'll possibly appear in the chat, because yes, they would be useful. So we should perhaps pop those up at the beginning. But yes, back to the bottle. I mean,
yeah. I mean, this one I believe is sort of 20-ish, so high teens, 20, I think. Which, for first are, I mean, they're pretty premium. That's what I believe it goes for. I'm talking about retail prices.
Yes. I think the complaint usually is that these bottles difficult to pop in an ordinary wine rack or fridge, but I feel an era where packaging generally is changing and wine sort of resisted, being in 75 cl, straight stand-up bottle, I think is actually all part of the story. It gives you something surely to relate, to tell people, to explain why you've got this different traditional shaped bottle. I mean, and I think that's all part of the fascination. It's great.
I agree. I think it's a shame, in fact, that quite a lot of growers have opted for the Burgundy bottles and different ones. So they're not even flutes. It seems a shame when something's that distinctive. And we do have people who come in, have you got any box Beutel? And we do try to have some box Beutel. We're picking some up later this week, funnily enough. I adore them. But, all that stuff about storage and, I get that, but it's just so distinct. So long may it continue. The box Beutel, the goat sack, is the direct translation.
Yes.
Should we? There we go. So 12.5%, 2 grams residual sugar. That's pretty dry. Acidity quite high, but it seems very balanced. Yeah. Are we ready to move on to the next wine? Then?
David, just one quick question from Karen Jenkins, who's asked, hi Karen, style they have always made, and I assume that might be within the framework of the dryness of the wine we're looking at, the pure mineral. Do you know the
we're talking about
whether there's been any? I hope I've interpreted your question correctly, Karen. The wines become modern.
I visited them in the sort of mid 2000s, so like 2004, 2005, and there was a Riesling then which came from Klingenberg, which is around the corner, a very steep slope, and it might have had a little bit of Silvaner in it as well. But at that stage, it was already this kind of thing. It was a dry wine. And my understanding is that that's how they were making wines from the early 90s. I don't think the style has changed massively, little tweaks here and there, but certainly in terms of the white wines and the Spätburgunders that I've had, the kind of the house style per se, if it has remained the same. And certainly with the Spätburgunders, there would be quite a lot of new oak to begin with. They seem to have rode back on that a bit. I was lucky enough to have a dinner with Stuart Pigott, Anna Kriebel, and Sebastian Fürst came over, a number of other people there as well. And there was a kind of vertical of his top Spätburgunders, and they really aged beautifully. And a great grower. So it looks like we're moving on to Rheinhessen now. So Rheinhessen's interesting. So it for many, many years, it was tarred by the brush of its success with Liebfraumilch. Liebfraumilch doesn't exist on the German market. but massive in the UK. And unfortunately, that's a legacy that some of our older customers still remember. So in the 60s and 70s, it was it's a very fertile region. It's relatively flat or at best gently rolling countryside, and they grow lots of things there: fruit, veg, flowers, but they also grow grapes. And during the late 80s, early 90s, there was a revolution taking place. We're going to look at a wine by Jochen Dreissigacker, and he's from Bechtheim, which is there in the kind of halfway up on the kind of right-hand side near Osthofen. Now that's the bottom right-hand corner of Rheinhessen, which was the least fashionable part of the least fashionable region in Germany for many years. And what happened, although Klaus-Peter Keller came along, who's a very highly regarded grower, Philip Wittmann, people like that. And all of a sudden, they were getting young growers going to Geisenheim, to the wine university in the Rheingau, and coming back to their parents' Weinguts, the wineries, and saying, I want to make top class wine. And the parents would go, yeah, what does that involve? And they'd say, well, basically, we're going to have to reduce the yields. So we're going to be producing much less, and we're not going to be able to charge any more for it. In fact, we're going to alienate a lot of our existing customers, because they're used to having very inexpensive wines and a different style. And so it's a massive, massive gamble. But Dreissigacker is a good example. Winter, Stefan Winter. There are loads that popped up in this part of the region. Anyway, just you can tell. I mean, when you taste it, when you smell it, and it's got incredible impact, I think. I mean, it's bang. It's just sort of in your face. I mean, not in a nasty way. So this is Jochen Dreissigacker. I think he's 39 at the moment. I met him in 2004, 2003, something like that. And it was very much a family concern, tiny little winery, parents very much around, but very dynamic, positive guy. He's grown that over the years, so he's now got I haven't got my notes with me, but substantially more hectares. It might be I might be confusing if like 39 hectares or something, but anyway, it's much bigger. He's also a really nice guy, and he recently opened this full-on I shouldn't use the word, but no, I'd say, full on in your face kind of impressive state of the art winery, quite showy, as you can see. Now, in some areas, some people might go, oh, there's somebody who's really splashing the money around and resent it or be jealous in some way. But because he's such a nice guy, everybody is very up for it, and everybody's kind of rooting for him. You don't need to root for him; he's doing very well. But everybody's very appreciates his success, which is great. But this is a classical.
Just a quick one.
A quick
Sorry,
one.
Dave, to jump in. In my vineyard, they're a little bit like sort of wine speed dating, to be streamed interviews and tours of vineyards and wineries with winemakers. They'll be up for streaming from tomorrow morning, and we'll get the details of the link up there. So we've got 4 winemakers, of which Johan is actually one of them. So just to jump in, you can actually catch up with him tomorrow morning, which would be lovely. So that's from I believe 10 o'clock tomorrow. But I'll be corrected if I.
Well, you can do that, and you do that in depth.
Yes.
Right. Cool. So as you can see, this is a classic modern style dry Riesling. This is his entry level. I think this weighs in around 16 pounds, that kind of thing, somewhere 15 to 17 retail. I mean, I think this is a brilliant example of a dry Riesling, loads of impact, loads of texture. What more could you want? And very affordable, I think.
We've got a few comments from the panel, actually. I mean, all very positive. Vivian Frank's quite refreshing citrusy notes, lovely example, rosemary, brown, high. Agreeing with that quite sort of forward, citrusy, fresh kind of. You talked about liveliness and energy before, and I think you've mentioned a battery as well for that. Sort of acidity that just tingles your tongue, and just.
It does.
I mean, there's quite a lot of nice white fruit in here, but for me, it's really electric as well. Yeah, I'd say it's very live.
And a kind of limey kind of quality as well. So like lime peel, but not not harsh or not bitter in any way. No, I mean it's a wonderful wine. Excellent example of modern dry Riesling. Very happy with that. Quite often, as you can see on the stats. Quite often with the entry-level dry, the Trockens, they can have some residual sugar. I mean, 9 is the threshold for Trocken, but they generally, so this is close to 7 grams. I mean, it's not nothing, but it's not 8.8 or whatever. But then by contrast, they'll be balancing that with a slightly higher acidity as well. So I mean, I think that's a brilliant wine. So are we ready to move on? Yeah, perfect.
Just very quick one on there. I mean, how important is that? So we've talked about dry wines and your early experience with the winery, for example, of switching over to predominantly dry, and then perhaps you're drinking the more off-dry styles yourself. But I mean, does this even matter with a wine like this? I mean, the point is about the balance, surely. I mean, I don't come to that and think, oh my goodness, it's got near on 7 grams per litre of which you probably find a lot of commercial Chardonnay and other Pinot Grigios
exactly
as well. But,
yeah, exactly.
But the balance is there with the acidity. And do you find, for example, with your customers at the winery, that they would be troubled by that sort of near?
Absolutely not. No. I mean, I was. No, not at all. I mean, that is technically dry, and I think the key for us is dry. And quite often, when we're visiting growers, they'll say, "Do you want to taste the Haupttrocken or Feinherb?" And I generally say, "We really don't have a market for it. It's like it's dry, or if it's sweet, then properly sweet. They're two distinct things." There are customers who start the way in is dry, and most people stay there. The market generally is for dry wines. I mean, it's hard to sell a demi-sec from Vouvray, for instance. Sauterne, all those sweet wines. There is a very limited market for those wines, and most people drink dry wines. That's the focus of it. We have about 3 or 4% of our range is sweet. Very rarely we buy a Feinherb, and I know there are growers on the Mosel in particular who operate very, very happily in that kind of 10 to sort of 20 grams of residual sugar. To me, sometimes the sweetness is a kind of a crutch. It's like it smudges it and it turns everything a bit soft focus. So for me, it loses a little bit of precision. So I'm more comfortable personally with dry wines, and certainly, I mean, our customers love those wines. Plus also when we're talking about sweetness and the sense of sweetness, when we get onto the next wine, which is from the Mosel, this is a Spätlese Trocken, so late harvested, still dry, technically dry, but there's a lot of texture and in the mouth, as you'll find out. So here we are. This is a map of the Mosel. And if you see where Bencastel Kues is there in that loop, you can see it. Yes, and we zoom in. Marvelous, Bencastel Kues. So that strip from Bencastel up towards Zelting and Rachtich, that's an uninterrupted steep slope with famous villages. So Grach, we've got Velen, and then we've got Zeltingen there. I mean, not forgetting Bencastel itself with the amazing doctor. So both Velen and Zeltingen have a Sonnenur. So Sonnenur meaning sundial, and they have a physical sundial in the side of the quite famous. I'm sure you'll all have seen photographs of it. Very, very steep slopes. So yes, here we go. Now, this is particularly interesting. There's a sundial there on the left, and above it, the picture of the vineyards of Zeltingen, and then a beautiful view during harvest as well on the right. This is particularly enjoyable, this one, for me. I mean, I particularly like blue slate, and there's not much blue slate on the Mosel, but this is different to the grey and different to the red slate. And this makes this wine, I think, particularly distinctive. There's the close-up of blue slate itself. There's a kind of an oily deposit in it. I think somebody described it to me. I'm no master geologist, but they say that there are different textures to these different slates. The Rotschiefer, the red slate, is red because of the iron in it, and that tends to give it a very exotic kind of a sense of exotic fruits, dried, like kind of passion fruit, guava, that kind of stuff. Yes, tropical fruit, exactly. I should also point out that it's a Spätlese Trocken, so it's a dry wine. It is late harvested. On some of the notes, the word Trocken had slipped off, unfortunately. Yes, tropical, exactly. So there's Johannes Selbach on the left, and on the right, there's Christian Volks, the winemaker. I met him originally when he was at Gutsverwaltung Niederhausen Schloss Böckelheim in the Nahe, a famous estate on the Nahe, which is now called Gut Hermannsberg. When this picture was taken, he was working at Kartäuserhof, Christoph Tyrell's winery on the Ruhr. So Christian's been, he was born on the Mosel, and he's now back on the Mosel making the wine with Johannes Selbach and his kids.
Yeah, David, a couple of comments in. Firstly, about the style. I mean, couldn't agree more. I mean, Nathan love that Spätlese Trocken, so gentle and warmly textured, and then Vivian's talking about, agreeing with you about the tropical fruit characters, which come through in a richness, and Rian, who may be a little biased, Wines of Germany, but will allow this. Seriously delicious, that one. I absolutely, it's hit with me as well. Archie McDermott, that for me is really stand out. Archie has asked, is there a bit of botrytis on this, or is it just the terroir? And actually, it's something that occurred to me. Is there a little hint, do you think, of...
Highly, well, it's 2018. Unlikely, because 2018 was one of the healthiest vintages of all time. I remember many growers saying to me they'd never seen grapes as healthy as that. So I doubt there's much botrytis. I mean, it's just good old-fashioned ripeness, and then an incredible amount of concentration and extract they describe about it. Highly unlikely. I mean, I wouldn't swear, there could be a tiny percentage, but there were very, very few botrytized wines. In fact, off the top of my head, I can't think of any off the top of my head. So I think what you're also getting there is that incredible dizzy minerality. I mean, it is just so concentrated and packed with minerals and texture. No, wonderful wine.
It's for me, it's the way that a wine that has been just keep coming back to the word texture, and is sort of richly textured. Something that's that richly textured can still dance so lightly across the palate, if you see what I mean. There's a sort of juxtaposition between the two sides of it. But it's very, very appealing wine.
Well, a delicacy, finesse, elegance, that kind of the tension that we might have been talking about earlier between ripeness and acidity. That's a great Riesling. Well, that's what one's looking for in a great Riesling, I think. So should we move on to the next one, or more there? Yeah, good. So we're off to the... Yeah.
Sorry, over to you. Yes, and we're off to
the Rheingau.
Rheingau, thanks.
I thought it'd be nice also to put an aged dry Riesling in the lineup as well. So Rheingau, like Mosel and Rheingau are considered the pinnacle of the pyramid in terms of status in German wines, in German Rieslings, with a Nahe possibly slightly just in there. Some people put it there as well. I generally see Rheingau as a kind of slightly more opulent, less of that kind of lightness of touch, a little bit kind of Baroque even, kind of perfumed, you're kind of like the Baroque Rococo ceilings, kind of organ music, that kind of thing. I get that with some of them. So this is from J.B. Becker. Well, his name, that was his grandfather. His name is Hajo, or Hans Josef Becker. He's a mature winemaker, let's put it like that. He makes his wines in a very traditional way, occasionally a bit controversial with some of the other growers around, big old casks. I wonder if we can zoom in as well. It's just next to Eltville, and it's from a place called Valoof. And there's a right on the front, kind of where there's like a ferry line. There's like a dotted line across the river there. They're just there. So for many years, it was him and his sister Maria, of similarly advanced years. Recently, he married a younger woman called Aoife. I can't remember her second name, doesn't matter. Anyway, she was there doing soil analysis for him, and one thing led to another. And I'm compressing that story enormously. But J.B. Becker has this, as you can see, the old casks there, the old Fuda. So they have a very deep, very, very damp cellar, which is wonderful. Some people think they should bottle earlier. I think these wines are really, really interesting, young or old, but they have lots of old wines. So 98. On the label, it says Spätlese. On the invoices, it says Spätlese Trocken. It's 10 grams of residual sugar. So they could easily have got away with saying it's Spätlese Trocken, and it is effectively Trocken now, in my opinion. So in my opinion, it's very similar in the nose when you smell it to any 98, whether it's sweet or half dry or dry. It's got a kind of a sort of parquet flooring kind of polish, waxy kind of nose, I think sometimes, or you know, a kind of an old library with sort of big old leather chairs or something. Sometimes a little bit of kind of coconut or dried pineapple, things like that. But then you think, the British wine trade used to say dry wines don't age. I mean, I beg to differ. Yes, this is quite advanced, and it does smell old. It is old, but I think it's been doing very well.
I'm getting sort of, candied fruit, citrus, you say, perhaps more exotic, sort of pineapple. I love your rock kind of organ music, so the deep tones as well. I get a sort of like a dry honeycomb thing going on.
I
think
nice.
Vivian's mentioned gorgeous colour. Demonstrates how age-worthy these wines are. So she's gone with honeyed poached pear and tart tatin. And the tart tatin I can get as well. I mean, all things that are making my mouth water as I speak. Very interestingly, that might be worth throwing in, because we haven't really talked about Riesling and its pairing potential with food. What's your? I think generally Riesling's sort of thrown up as and possibly especially German Rieslings is thrown up as going really versatile, pair with a great diverse selection of different dishes. So it would be two questions to you. Do you think that really holds true, that sort of catch-all, that it tends to be a very flexible variety? Or do we need to think a little bit more specifically than just saying, whatever it may be some roast pork, it may be something that's Pacific Asian kind of inspired or whatever. Throw some Riesling at it, or is that too much of a generalization, David?
No, I mean that is our line, and certainly my line. Riesling works with absolutely everything, whether it's red meat or white meat or fish or cheese or anything. And I mean, it's a little bit of a. It's an easy thing to say. It works great with Asian food, Indian food, curries or whatever, or Chinese and all the rest of it. Yes, of course it does. But I mean, that puts it into a kind of a narrow box. And I think it works, certainly in my experience, it works with everything. I mean, the first time I visited that first week when I went to Germany for the first time, went to this great restaurant in Hattenheim where I go every time I go now. I'll be there tomorrow night, funnily enough, called Zum Krug in Hattenheim. Amazing wine list, that thick. Ordered Sauerbraten for lunch, which is a lovely beef dish, so kind of slow cooked, marvelous acidity, and with some kind of depth. It's kind of overnight with wine. You kind of marinate it and then you cook for hours and hours and hours with dumplings. And I said, what would work with this? And they recommended a wine by Becker, and it was perfect. So ever since then, yeah, I just maintain it works with everything.
Just got to quickly bring in a couple of comments because again, this is there's some great comments about this. Some of the descriptions. Karen Jenkins, brilliant with Italian antipasti, cold meats, etc. Luciano, hi. Girotta is saying, well, this J. Becker, great colour, gorgeous honeyed nose. Sorry, someone else was saying, yes, it was with roast white meat, and that's sort of where I'm thinking as well, perhaps. And then Archie McDermott sort of hits it on the nail in a humorous way. Absolutely banging wine, very Hogwarts. Sorry, Archie, I can't do your deep Scottish accent. Very Hogwarts, candied pineapple, old books, and thoroughly magical. And I think that's a very nice tasting note.
It's a lovely note.
Excellent. And so the quick one for me then. So the aging, in your opinion and experience, once you start aging, and of course Rieslings can age so fabulously well as we're experiencing here. How does that change their sort of food compatibility? Are there any particular pointers that you would throw out? Does it improve it, or do you have to become a little more kind of courteous to the wine in terms of what you're throwing at it?
Well, I suppose there is a danger as some wines get older, they get a little bit more fragile. You don't want to overwhelm them, but I wouldn't describe this as particularly fragile. We had until 2 years ago, they still had a 1988 Spätlese Trocken until we bought it all. That was fine. I haven't had anything. Oh no, I've had 76s and 71s from Becker. Delicious, still holding up very well. I've had 59s. I mean, it's my birth year. Auslesers, believe it or not. But the wines in those days, you think Ausleser, those are so sweet, so much residual sugar. But any older grower will say today that the climate is so different nowadays that our idea of what an Auslese is or a Spätlese, I'm talking about residual sugar styles now, our notion of that is completely different to how it was, in 76, which is a great dry vintage, a bit like 2003 or whatever. 59 was considered very ripe. It was a very hot vintage. But they never reached those same UXA levels. So they taste, to all intents and purposes, more like a kind of today's aged Cabernet would be, that kind of thing. Maybe not even as sort of rich as that. I mean, they're long, something you could easily have with, fish or sole or with they're different now. I mean, there is a separate discussion to be had sometime, and is out of the context of this, about when you would drink those wines, an Auslese or a Spätlese, what do they go with and all the rest of it. But that's for another occasion.
Yes. But
I'm glad everybody's enjoying this wine. I mean, it just shows that these wines can age and across the board. If you forget your Dreißig Acker Riesling Trocken and you put that away for 10, 15 years, I'm sure that'll give you plenty of enjoyment when you drink it if you forget it, for example.
I think there's a nice comment here. I mean, Derek Crooks saying, just talks about sort of almost contradictory nature in the wine. You'd think it was sweet after sniffing it, but that acidity and flavour, lovely. And Steve Kirkham adding in with still has this lovely ripeness, fruit, texture, acidity balance, which is why it works so well. And I think that's the key point, obviously, about the aging of these wines, is that the acidity in there is still this beautiful sort of linear thread running through it, and that just doesn't go, and that just gives you so much possibility when it comes to food. So I think we probably dealt quite a bit with the food. Yeah. I'm aware of time as well. So the next leap is to well, I mean, right on trend, and has been for a little while now amongst those certainly in the know, I think it's fair to say. We're going to treat ourselves with a couple of Spätburgunders. So David, again, over to you. Why, we asked kind of why Riesling, why Pinot Noir?
Well, Pinot Noir, I mean, I'm sure I don't really need to answer that. I mean, Pinot Noir, fantastic. I mean, Red Burgundy, we're all probably brought up on Red Burgundy and fell in love with it through Pinot Noir, through that. So, it comes as a surprise.
Why German Pinot Noir? Why German was the question.
Why German? The short commercial answer would be lots of bang for your buck. I think that's a good answer. And also, I mean, we have many customers who come in for Red Burgundy, adore Red Burgundy, marvelous, obviously seriously expensive. And sometimes, you say, have you tried a German Pinot? people are initially surprised. They say, I had no idea, red wine was made in Germany. They make more Pinot Noir, still Pinot Noir, than France, bizarrely. But bear in mind that a lot of the Pinot Noir is used for Champagne, which is an interesting statistic. So it is very popular in Germany, and only recently has started kind of becoming known outside of Germany. For me, it has a kind of a presence. It has a texture, and in the R. So we're near Bonn now. We're very, very close to Bonn. So this is the furthest region north on this side of Germany. Excluding East Germany with Sachsen and Saale-Unstrut. It's a small valley, a short valley. There aren't so many growers. Bad Neuenahr, Ahrweiler, it's a spa town effectively. They join together. Ahrweiler to the left of Bad Neuenahr, just before Walporzheim, is a walled medieval town, very distinctive. Bad Neuenahr is, there are lots of Kurs, people get prescribed to go there to take the waters and all that kind of thing. It's always been known for red wine. The Romans, like they did across Germany, they started planting in the Ahr Valley. Many of the locals say it's got a Mediterranean climate because it's very sheltered. I disagree with that. It's not very Mediterranean at all. It's still very drafty and cold and wet and in autumn and winter. But because it's very, very steep, they can pick late, like on the Mosel, and they can get as much ripeness as they need in normal circumstances. Anyway, so we're going to look at, the first one is by Stodden. And so if you, sorry, this is the view of the valley. This is from a hotel above Walporzheim. And this is looking east across the valley. You can see the vineyards on the left of the shot. And we're looking over Ahrweiler towards, there's the motorway, a main kind of north to south motorway that crosses on stilts. You'll see a photo of that later. Then by sunset. So this is a hotel, a beautiful hotel actually, or a beautiful view, let's put it like that, with a pretty decent restaurant and an okay wine list. Better than okay. It's called Hohenzollern, just if you get the opportunity to go there, although I'd leave it for obvious reasons for a few months. But now's probably a good time to say a bit about the devastating floods. So as you probably, everybody has seen in the press or seen pictures, terrible pictures. This was July the 14th. And it surprised everybody, the intensity of the flood. There are very rarely floods, and pretty much all the winemakers are on the valley floor. And so these are shots from Adenauer, who we work with. And you can see the water came up just below the window line and, tore through the whole building. They've lost a lot. Lots of tanks were turned over, casks, destroyed. The stock room there on the bottom right, I shudder to think what they lost there. And we had a little flood, nothing like this recently in the London floods recently, and had water in our cellar. And, the impact on cardboard, you just have to move those very, very fast. And there was no way they could get to these in time to save these. Also, all the, the big crates, those sort of metal wire crates, holding, they all kind of tumbled and all got mixed up. So there's the danger with there's a difficulty of identifying those that aren't broken. So it's horrendous. Utilities are still very patchy. Many growers from nearby regions like the Mosel, Rheingau, Nahe have been going to help growers in the art with the cleanup, and a lot of the equipment has been damaged or destroyed, and harvest will be coming, albeit at the end of September, but it's a hell of a job. So there have been funds like disaster fund, relief funds set up. Mark Adenauer, who's a member of the VDP who we work with, he set one up. This is for the benefit of all growers. in the valley. The VDP, the VDP, set one up, and then the Deutsches Weininstitut also, German Wine Institute. Wines of Germany are connected with them. So if you can make a donation, it will obviously go to a very, very good cause. We've donated to a couple as well, but it would be, it's going to take a lot to get over this. I'm hoping to visit at the end of the month. I don't know whether they'll be ready. I know not for a tasting, clearly, but just to say hello. And I haven't seen it with my own eyes yet. But a terrible thing. Back to the wines.
Yeah, those pictures really, as I say, those pictures really bring it home. And I know we saw some pretty devastating scenes through, the media. But yeah, so in the chat, just to reiterate, I'm sure you all spotted it, that there's a link there, and also, well done, the Association of Wine Educators as well, who've also obviously been raising some funds to help out. But do go on and help if you can. Sorry, so yeah, back to the
wines. Back to nicer things, and mindful of the time as well. So I'll rattle through these. So Stodden, this is from the village of Rech, and it's a tiny little village along the tiny river, but it's really only 10 minutes drive from Bad Neuenahr, 15 max. Now, Stodden was one of those growers, I think we mentioned with first right at the beginning, the so-called kind of barrique wine growers. And they were the ones who started making more serious wines. Before, I'm talking about maybe the early 90s, late 80s. And before then, they always made wine in the valley, and the Aar was better known, God forbid, for off-dry and sweet red wines, very pale in colour. And they had their fan base, usually the visitors who came to take the waters in the spa and all that kind of stuff. But in Stodden was one, Nelles, Ardenoya, people like that, Meyer Nakel. They all started around the same sort of time, early 90s, to make more serious wines, reduce the yield very severely, and then some oak management, then kind of some sitting on the skins like kind of 24 hours or several days. So techniques, and then also cleaning up in the wineries as well. So Stodden. This is his entry-level Spätburgunder, and it's I find it very delicate but very pure, plenty of finesse in my opinion. This, if off the top of my head, I think this is raised in 1,000 litre barrels off the top of my head. And so there's no real sense of oak there. As you go up the food chain, if you like, up the ladder to the GGs, there's a lot more oak at play, and some oak like new oak. But again, I think they've rode back from the kind of, in my opinion, over oaky wines. They're often quite oak dominated by oak at first, but over time. And then the kind of sheer texture as we go higher up the food chain as well, and the concentration. How are you getting on with this, Andrew?
All those things. I mean, I think there's a lovely, really elegant kind of Pinot fruit just right throughout. For me, there's still, and I think this is a good thing, there's still just a little hint of grip, which just holds it all together. And it's, where are we? We're 2019, aren't we? So I just think that's a really, really good all-rounder. It's a lovely varietal character, a little bit of structure, just say, pulling it all in, tightening it up a little bit. My wines are quite cool, actually. My Pinots went in the fridge last night with my Rieslings. I've been desperately trying to bring them back up, but I've also got that freshness. It's probably a reasonable temperature now, so it's just beginning to express itself a little more. So, but yeah, good. I don't know if anyone else out there via chat has any more thoughts. Lovely, sweet, ripe Morello cherry flavors with a hint of amaretto, a very distinctive style. Says, Vivian.
Yeah.
I think I'll go with which is good. And what do you think? I think you could give this. You say we're sort of, for them, they're entry level, but I'm thinking another year or two.
Oh yeah, would be lovely.
This
yeah.
is perhaps going to become more and more generous, and
This, if you had to make a comparison with Burgundy, I would put this somewhere in the Côte de Beaune, that kind of area. It's maybe got a little bit more texture than some of the Bourgogne Rouges, depending on the vintage. 19 probably less so, but this is, no, I mean, I think it's beautiful. It's very pure, and I think if you leave it in the glass for another half an hour, I think it'll, depending on your starting temperature, Andrew, I think it'll develop more and more. We can maybe we should move on to Nelis, the final wine. So we're back. We're zoomed out to the big map again now. So to the right of Bardenoy and Arvala is Heimersheim. So that's to the right of this motorway, the 61, and you can see it clearly from the motorway as you drive south. So Heimersheim, Nelis are right in Heimersheim, and they look towards the Landskrona, which is immediately opposite. You can see the vineyard there, Landskrona. Slaty vineyard, volcanic, and so this is a different style, although I'd say that Stodden is probably more subtle. The Stodden's about, I think, retail sort of 25-ish, that kind of thing, £25 a bottle. The Nelis Ruba, this is their biggest selling wine and their biggest output. This is 19.99, so £20. And for me, I've always found with their wines, they're kind of bigger, more textured. They're kind of fuller. You could argue that Stodden's possibly finer or more refined. But in terms of impact, I think this is a really good example. Sort of forest, slightly smoky, and I often find, like with these wines, with Nelis, with Ardenoir as well, that they have a kind of sappy texture and mouthfeel, which is maybe different to a lot of Pinot Noirs from elsewhere around the globe. But it's a very distinctive. It's got a kind of a fluid. It's almost like a viscous quality. I don't know if you get any of that.
Definitely get that. The intensity, and you describe sort of almost viscous quality. It's the depth, the richness, and what have we got? We've got comments. Wild berries, fine tannins, but definitely elegant, clean, dry, rose, and earthy. I definitely get those sort of earthy, foresty notes here as well. Maybe just a little bit of spiciness. There's a lot going on. Yeah, it's more of an explosion in comparison on the palate. Yeah,
indeed.
What else have we got, Vivian? More penosity with this wine. Intense, complex, rich, more Burgundian, and then 20 quid, good value. And I definitely, there's a lot of wine for 20 quid there, I think.
There is, yes. Lots of, and long as well, I think. I mean, we haven't got time to get into it now, but one of the other discussions in the Ahr Valley and also in other parts of Germany, I'm in Baden at the moment, is around clones. So there are Burgundian clones about, and then there are the old German clones as well, the Spätburgunder, the old-fashioned Spätburgunder, which were originally trained for high yield and have now been, kind of cut. So they have a different flavor profile. They are distinctive as well, but we don't have time to get into that right now. But this is probably a good example. Stodden, that would be a French clone, if I remember correctly, and this Nelis one. They do have Burgundian clones with different bottlings, but this one is Spätburgunder, like proper German Spätburgunder. So pictures here, you can see there are other single bottlings there. They get bigger and bigger. Their top wine is B52, which is a little bit contentious. It was a name basically given to them by Stuart Piggott back in the 90s, tasting through the barrels, and he said, "Oh, what's this one called?" And the barrel number was 52, and then he said, "You should call it B52." And I don't think they realised There are slightly controversial side of that, but that has stuck, and so they have some other bottlings as a B48 and. But anyway, yeah. So Philip has taken over from his father Thomas, doing a great job. I think they've got a wide range of Spätburgunders, and they do very well.
Excellent. And as you said, David, aware of time, we've really fabulous tasting. Actually, there's one question which we missed earlier that Riaz just highlighted for Karen Jenkins, right towards the early on in the session. Actually. Karen said an interesting point about climate impact on what is now a sweet wine, but interesting to know if it's helped the Trocken styles, the dry styles as well. So basically greater ripeness, making them more balanced. Have you got any sort of thoughts on that over time? Whether, and I remember many years ago when I was in the Mosel with Ernst Lusen, and he was making me literally lick slate and kind of get some sort of almost electric kind of sensation as he explained the terroir. But him telling me that he's going, in my father's day you would have 3 good years and 7 bad years. Now we're having 7 great vintages and maybe 3 slightly dodgy ones, and that's going way back. So just with that background, just perhaps quickly, because I'm aware of people's time, but what's happening with the balance of German wines generally with climate?
Well, now unfortunately it's going the other way, in that it's rare to have a disastrous vintage. Because also, even with frost and hail, as long as it comes at earlier in the year, they weren't affected like Burgundy was, for instance, this year, because Riesling, for example, is much later. So they weren't flowering yet, so they weren't affected. But the difficulty over recent vintages has been that's 18, 19, and 20. They're very, very hot and they're very dry. 19 was particularly dry, although ironically, it seems to have more acidity than the 18. 20 is a very healthy vintage and ripe vintage as well. So the issue now is around heat, and the vines can shut down if it gets too hot, like in 2003, for instance. So that's another issue. So how do they get around that? I mean, the grower called Melsheimer on the Mosel, he's saying that he's actually gone out of his way to get an northeast facing vineyard, because with global warming, that's going to get better and better. He says the south facing ones are too simple, too hot, too ripe, too fat, and I think that's true as well. We hold in our minds some kind of idea or concept of an ideal German Riesling Trocken, and that's moving. If you vinify, that's the other thing. If you vinify some of these wines out completely dry, they're going to end up at 14.5%, and nobody wants a 14.5% Riesling. So that's another challenge. But they do still have difficult vintages. 14, it rained and rained and rained. And good growers make good wine, lots and lots of selection, and it's one of my favorite vintages from particular growers. And they said, it was no fun harvesting. It was wet. You should have seen the grapes. I don't want to show you a photo. It just basically looked like a kind of a black sponge. Sounded disgusting. Some of them were so depressed at the time that they didn't taste it. They just did it, put it in tanks, left it. And then in January or February, they tasted and think, hang on a second, it's actually not bad. So, that's just an example of a recent considered bad vintage. Right, there we go.
Oh, excellent. Well, hopefully, yep, there you go. And hopefully that answers your questions. Thank you for your comments. Kind comments in the chat as well. It's very much been David's show, and it's been absolutely fascinating. A great selection of wines. Really enjoyed tasting through and learning more about them as well. So it's been a learning curve for me. So thanks
Thank
again
you very
for
much.
all your comments out there, and I hope we've answered a few of your questions. So there's a on-trade focus session with Ronan Saburn this afternoon. This was billed as an off-trade, more of a sort of indie merchant off-trade focus session. Tomorrow afternoon at 3:30, if you look on harpers.co.uk on our landing page, you'll find a link for our closing debate to the Big G Sessions this year, which should be really fascinating. We've got we've got a panel of Germany experts, and I think that could well be. We're going to be looking at where Germany is in the market here, and perception of it, and the commercial reality, and discussing matters pertaining to that. So, and I'll be chivying that conversation along too. So, but for me, thank you, David, very much. Thanks, Wines from Germany. It's been great partnering with us as Harpers, and thank you all for joining us, and hopefully next time in person. And RRPs are coming out, as Rianne's just said in the chat. Excellent. Thanks a lot.
Bye. Thanks for coming.